So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Michelle and my wonderfully special guest, Jessica Smith Dos Santos. Jess is a coach, author, and speaker. Hold your book up, Jess. This book just got released. The shit they don't tell you in nursing school. I'm so awesome. I'm so proud of you. We'll kick it off with a quote, but Jess and I have known each other for a little more than a minute. It was funny because you were just sharing me offline that your assistant commented, "Oh, it's so great you've got this meeting, you're going to record and, you guys have the same last name." And so to anyone listening, the same last name came from the same person. So Jess got it from her dad, and I did too when I was married to him. And so I was blessed to meet Jess, and I think you were 8. You were
That's
8
about
or
right.
9.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute. It's been a minute.
It's been a few minutes, which is
And
so
I'm just,
awesome. Like, can I just say, who
yes,
can still say, I used to be married to her dad and we're still friends?
yes,
Isn't that
yes,
cool?
yes. No, there's probably not a lot of people, but
No.
there's probably more people than what we think
Yeah.
that are out there. Yeah, if you can just stay in that buddy space and get back to that space of respect, then yeah.
So good. So
So
good.
anyway, I'm excited to have you. So let's kick it off with a quote. This one, we had a few of them, and this one was the winner. Leadership is not about punishing mistakes. It's about using them as opportunities to strengthen relationships and grow together. We don't know who to attribute that to, so eventually we'll just lay claim to whatever. When I read this and think about it, because Jess and I talked about topics with this particular episode, it brings me back to this space of, and we talked about Jess, we have choices, is that if you're out there trying and doing new things, you're gonna be making mistakes. I mean, the only way that you can avoid mistakes is to literally sit in your home and do nothing, try nothing. You're not going to grow and learn. You can be the exact same person that you are if you don't ever try anything new. And I think it's a travesty if that's the case. And in this space, leaders have a choice to step in and create teams that go, you know what? We're pushing the limits. We're going to be innovators. We're going to try new things. And in that process, we're going to do a lot of learning because not everything's going to work out okay.
Right.
So I love the topic that you picked, Jess. And so welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So talk to me a little bit about some of your lessons, because a lot of that stuff's going to be in your book, which I haven't read yet. Okay. But if you think about some standouts for you along your leadership journey, because you were a nurse, you made the intentional decision to walk away from nursing.
Yep.
You went into the coaching realm about getting people, it's not just physically healthy, but mentally healthy, because the mental comes before the physical. And then stepping into that space, and you've been on your own learning and growing journey along that process. What are some things that stand out for you that you want to share with people, of highlights, or, wow, I learned that I never want to be that?
Well, we can start with, I learned that I never want to be that from experiencing it, right? Like, as a new nurse, as a new coach, getting into situations where I'm like, okay, I have enough courage to try something. Like, I'm going to stick my neck out there and I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to try to innovate and I'm going to work on a new skill, only to, like, big fat failure, right? Like, oh, well, that went better in my head. But then not only to feel that, like, okay, well, I tried, it didn't quite go well, and then you're struggling with that, like, I feel a little insecure, I don't know, what should I do differently, like, and you're looking to a leader for mentorship, for guidance, to support that confidence in a way that allows you to embrace the obstacle as the way rather than in the way. But then just being completely trashed, like, oh, you're just a new grad, oh, you just suck at that, like, well, there's no hope for you, right? And it's very much like you feel like that punished child that's just been spanked and put in a corner, rather than truly seen and fostered and cared for. So from that perspective, like that sort of punishment put down paradigm that I experienced a lot of, it made me, when I realized, like, what if it doesn't have to be that way? And what if I can take this next opportunity to share some things that I've learned to that new person that just made the same mistake that I remember making, but that I felt so ashamed and put down by? And how can I support them in fostering it, doing it differently? It's like your voids become your values, right? So when the void is like, I wasn't fostered, nobody spoke hope into me. Like I just felt punished and ashamed and sad and not sure where to go. Whereas how can I take that and turn it into something beautiful for the next person? Like I don't have to choose to continue this culture.
So what did you do? What does that look like? Because my brain went to a number of different things that we have the choice of as leaders, but I want to hear for you how you did it, because we can go from this space of I'm experiencing this and it sucks, I don't like it, right? But what are the steps that you can actually create a different experience for others?
Totally. That's where the beauty of questions comes in. And I always like to start a scenario, like no matter what it is, like, hey, what do you feel like went well? What do you feel like you actually did good? Because the truth is, in any situation, no matter how big fat of a failure it is, there is always one thing that we can hold on to that was like, oh, well, I did actually do that pretty well. And if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't change that specific thing. Like, okay, great. So then we can start there. Like they've identified their own thing, right? So it's building that intrinsic recognition that like, okay, I don't have to be consumed by the big fat failure of it. I can call out my own greatness. And then the next question is, so if you had it to do again, what would you do differently? So instead of focusing on like, well, that outcome was crap, right? It's more of like, oh, okay, so if I could rewind the whole if I had a redo, because the truth is we're going to get redos, and it might not come in the exact same form, but it's going to come in another form so that you can grow. How would you do it differently? And then it gives them the opportunity to identify like, I might do this better, I might prep better, or I might practice this technique better, or maybe I just straight up wouldn't say that at all. That was probably not the best thing to say or do.
I think I'd turn around and leave
from the playbook, right? And then the third question is, are you open to some feedback? Because then you can support them with their blind spots, but it's permission driven rather than you did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, good luck next time, right?
Yeah.
So that really was the process, is like, not only am I sharing their goodness, but I'm allowing them to call out their own goodness so that they develop some self-efficacy, because they may be up against another leader at some point in their lives that doesn't quite understand what that looks like.
Well, so thank you for that. What I go back to is it's like being a parent. Nobody went through parent certification, right? Before the child arrived. And so you've got this kid that you're literally growing up with them. So you're going to have missteps. You're going to have stuff go along. What I love about what you said, and here's where my brain went, is you're asking them first what went well. So to your point, it's like, let's identify for ourselves and get ourselves credit for something, right? Something in this whole scenario went well. Either it was like, I made the decision and realized, oh, we got to stop. That's going well. Or at some point you had some awareness that, oh, this is probably not a good conversation to continue to be in. That went well. But you have the person identify something that went well. And I love that. The second part of it is you're giving them credit for the ability to critically think and to problem solve and to go, okay, so if you could do it differently, basically you had your one and here's a do-over. The last part of it that's so freaking important is to let them know by asking them, are you open to some feedback, which is what we do in coaching. And the person that you're talking to can say no. I've never had anyone say no. They're all very brave, but it gives them the opportunity to ready themselves to hear something, because you're letting them know the conversation is going to take a little bit of a different turn now, so that they can ready themselves for feedback and what's going on, versus the other scenario that you're talking about, which 100% put the blame on the person and assume their intent was to screw up. I love that.
Yeah,
Well
that's
done.
exactly it. And I think this, like, it's so, I mean, maybe this is my own perspective. I shouldn't generalize this, but I grew up in a culture where punishment and like every little thing that you didn't do was pointed out. And because of that, and because I have a different awareness now, like full transparency, it is something within myself that I have to be conscious of every single moment, because it's very natural and normal and easy for me to be like, well, that sucked, that sucked, that sucked, see you next time. Right? Like it's just it's a program that
Mhm.
I've been operating in for more years, right, than I have
Mhm.
not been operating in. And so as a leader, it's important for me to remember, like, how am I calling out their greatness? How
Mhm.
am I giving them the opportunities to grow? Because I
Mhm.
don't want to be a babysitter, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to create a scenario where I'm constantly having to micromanage.
Mhm.
And that only comes through showing people that you trust them to
Mhm.
take risks, and that you trust them to have those critical thinking skills, and that you trust them to learn and to grow each time, and that you believe in them.
Here's the other thing that comes to me because I'm bobbleheading. I'm going, yeah, yeah, that's yeah. The other piece of it, Jess, is that you actually allow them to be who they are.
Mhm.
Because part of the things that people can show up with all this criticism is that you didn't do it, and I'm going to fill in the blank my way,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so it's like, and the beauty of I think all this stuff in leadership and the lessons is the fact that we can learn from each other. So it's like I may have my way, but my way is not the only way. And it's like I was talking to somebody the other day, I put Waze on every time when I go anywhere. I know where I'm going, but I'm going to put Waze on because Waze will reroute me if there's stuff ahead,
Mhm.
right? And so I tell myself, yeah, I know the way to get there. But if Waze reroutes me, I'm like, I'm going adventuring.
Ooh, doggy.
Thing is, we can do that with different ways to problem solve, different ways to accomplish things. If we can just create the space for people to step in with their perspective, their idea.
Absolutely. And you know what's really cool about that is that the thing that we all want the most is to be seen and to be heard and to be valued as we are, right? And that's the culture that those questions set up, is
Mhm.
space for people to be authentic. And then what that creates, like, watch out. It's really
Mhm.
hard to stop the momentum behind a team that feels seen, heard, and trusted.
Mhm.
I remember, so my background is in ER nursing,
Mhm.
and I have a huge love for nursing students, for paramedic students, for new graduate nurses. Like, I was always like, give me the newbie. Like, I love mentoring newbies. And I remember this one girl, she was a paramedic student, and we had a patient come in completely unconscious, and like the crew was doing CPR.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, girl, have you done CPR yet? She's like, And I was like, do you want to today? She's like, not really. And I was like, why? She's like, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt them. And I was like, girl, they're dead. There's nothing that you can do that's going to make it worse.
Yeah, we got to
And
bring them back.
right. There's nothing you could, like, you cannot do a chest compression wrong except to not do one. And as
Yeah.
you're doing it, I'm going to be coaching you through the cadence and the depth. Like, you're going to get real time feedback on what that feels like. And she was like, I can't make them more dead. Okay. Right. It was like, I trust you to not hurt this person.
Yes. Yes.
And it was a really cool moment to watch her be like, I'm so scared, to like, she trusts me. I think I can do this. And
Mhm.
now, guess what? The world has a paramedic who is confident and competent and
Mhm.
independent. And God forbid you ever need chest compressions, she's going to do it right.
Yeah. Well, and she's gonna step in and question her own limiting beliefs that she had, and just with some basic facts. There was something that I wrote down the other day, and I don't know if I said it or someone else said it, but it was in a conversation. But it was there's power in empowering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things is here's your rules, here's the real stuff. Go get them. Go do this. Go be who you're supposed to be.
That's it. Well, and I love your comment about on the facts, right? Because in this whole scenario, there's also the facts versus the stories. And
Mhm.
her story was, I'm going to hurt this person.
Yeah.
I'm scared. I'm going to do it wrong. What if I make them worse? But the fact was, there's nothing you can do that's going to make
Yeah.
this scenario worse. Like everything that you try is only going to benefit. And I
Mhm.
think that's another, I mean, that's probably a whole nother leadership soundbite topic, but
That's the War and Peace novel version of leadership
right.
soundbites. Yeah, I'd be like, oh wow, 3 hours. It's a long soundbite.
I'll just stop that there. That went well.
We're all good. So I have to wonder, because you said it a few times, that you're wired a certain way, and I know your upbringing. I'm familiar with it,
Mhm.
and your story and your scenario, and I'm just so proud of you. But when I think back to wiring, how do you check yourself, Jess?
Mhm. Well, I always say everything begins with awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there came a point in my journey where I became aware of the fact of how others receive me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh. So, through my growing up and through like, you didn't do this right, you didn't do this right, you didn't
Mm-hmm.
do this right, there are benefits to being raised that way because I do have a very high attention to detail and I have a very high standard for things. And it goes too far when I'm unrealistic and I don't leave
Mm-hmm.
space for this is my way, this is
Mm-hmm.
the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus leaving space for other options. And
Yeah.
so like really it just starts with awareness and wiring can be rewired. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
when wiring goes bad on a house, you just put new wires in, right? And for the human brain, thank goodness, we can be rewired. So
Mm-hmm.
even though I can tend towards that way, the more I practice, the
Mm-hmm.
easier for it is for me to fall into fostering people and holding back that negativity, right, so to speak. And really it's not that it's negativity, it's just that like this went well, I would change this, right? So from that perspective, it's just knowing within myself, how do people receive me? And
Mm-hmm.
how can people receive me in a way that they walk away feeling better about who they are?
Mm-hmm.
That's really important to me.
It's so when you said awareness first, I say it all the time. Awareness is the first step in recovery. So you have to be aware before you can do anything about it, whatever it is, right? And the other thing that came to mind for me is everything that you were just talking about. It is about setting the intention for yourself and practicing. I totally agree. The brain can be rewired. And then all of a sudden, at some point, and I'm sure you've experienced it, you're like, I'm actually holding back, but I'm not having to hold back. I'm actually not going to this go-to that was my go-to all the time. And in reality, this doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to be real for myself. What that looked like for me in a situation that I'm watching where my mind is going, like ticking off all the things. I literally physically put my tongue between my teeth and bit down a little bit to like,
Yeah.
that is not coming out right now.
Mm-hmm.
And giving myself credit for knowing that it's okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
where I am right now, and there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the process of evolving. And I'm also going to be super transparent and tell you that it's not always perfect. There are times when I'm like, I just rattled off a list of 10 things that I perceive that you sucked at, and let me start over. Whoops.
It's so funny you say that. My brain, because I've at one point I was with an organization doing change management, so I was lead change consultant, and I come in on these projects that were already in flight.
Mm.
And so I come into them and I need the download now, because it's like, how are we going to do this? Who we're engaging with? Because it's like, oh, we need change. Yeah, you needed it back here. But yeah, okay. So, but my brain is rapid firing 50 zillion questions that we need answers to. Okay. But unless I want the person I'm talking to for their eyes to roll in the back of their head and they feel like they just got attacked, I'm going to hold back on those questions. I'm going to figure out the critical few that we need to start with. But for you, what you're talking about is that awareness as we get older, and because we've set the intention to say, you know what? I don't want someone to look at me, Michelle, and go, you know what, Michelle, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I don't want that experience. I want the experience that someone has, to your point, to align with my intention of the experience I was trying to create. And that takes practice.
It does. And, reflectively looking back, like, how did it make me feel when I was on the receiving end of that? And if I could do my experience differently, how would I have wanted to feel? And what would have needed to change in that experience for me to feel differently, to walk away from that feeling empowered and more confident and like I can do it and all the things. And so that's, and just another awareness tool of like, okay, well, if I don't have their experience, at least I have my experience and I have a few ideas of what would go differently. Like, let me go try those things.
Yep. I love it. Jess, thank you. So we don't go into mini War and Peace on leadership sound bites. I appreciate the time in the room. You're welcome back anytime that you want to share more of your journey, and I want to hear how the frickin' book sales go. I'm excited for you on that.
Well, we can celebrate. I sold 100 in my first week. I don't know if that's good, but I'm thrilled.
No, you're triple digits, woman. That's awesome.
Oh
yeah. I will put a link to, basically how to get a hold of you and the Amazon link for the book. When it'll be in the description. So if anybody's interested, it will be there and you know how to get it. So Jess, what are one or two things that you want people to walk away with around this topic that we've been chatting about today?
I would just say your superpower is your choice. So if you become aware of something, you always can choose to do it differently. And the second thing is I would tuck those questions in your pocket, not only when you're mentoring yourself, but when you're leading others, is where do you feel like went well? What would you do differently if you had a magic wand? And are you open to some feedback? And if you can't give yourself feedback, go find a friend who loves you and cares about you and is willing to challenge you a little bit for your growth. That friend that won't just be like, oh, honey, you're fine. Like, no, I feel like it wasn't quite fine, right? Have that friend that's going to be willing to hold that mirror up and be like, hey, girl, here's the things that I'm seeing that you might have missed.
Yeah, I'm going to continue in the feedback train, and I'm going to add to some stuff because I think there's some nuances in that are also helpful. Yes, I agree. Do the feedback. A lot of times people just don't know what to say. Their brains are not thinking around the feedback thing if you're asking someone for it. So a couple things. You can ask someone for feedback to say, hey, what went well that you want me to continue doing around this particular scenario that I was in, right? That they witnessed. And if you could have me do something differently or not bring it next time, right? Not do that thing, what would it be? So if you give people areas that they can do, then you've given their brain someplace to go. Because if someone's not used to feedback, they go, oh yeah, you were fine. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. But then again, they don't know what they're really responding to, right? So for me, it's don't assume people know what feedback looks like. The other part of it I'll say for a leader, when you are giving feedback, and more so if you could have someone who was just a train wreck. I mean, just a train wreck. They've identified the one thing, their opportunity. And if that's the case and what they've identified is something for them to work on, agree with that thing.
That's good.
And stop there. Because if you've got someone that's got a huge hole they got to dig out of, odds are they can't handle more than one thing they need to work on. So that's my recommendation as far as feedback goes, because I think the more challenged people are, the less they're able to deal with working on more than one thing.
So good. So good. Your listeners are going to be so happy they tuned in today. Thank you for this space.
Well, I'm happy I tuned in today.
Me too.
Yeah. So this has been Leadership Soundbites with Michelle and Jess. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe, and order Jess's book. All right. Until next time. Thank you.
Much love.